My name is Abby Pietrow. I am a senior animal care specialist at the Aquarium of Niagara.
Hello, lovers. My name is John Rossi, and I'm a touring drummer with a passion for all things animal. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos and aquariums. Now, I want to share some sexy stories from those places with you. So get ready to hear all about the love and lust you can find at the zoo. You're tuned in to Rossifari After Dark. Hello, lovers. Welcome back to Rossifari After Dark. It is a celebration of love on the podcast today as we are celebrating a slightly belated Valentine's Day by heading to the Aquarium of Niagara to talk all about penguin romance. And don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole episode like that because that's very hard for me to maintain. But yeah, I'm excited to have y'all here. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. I'm excited for a lot of reasons today. And first of all, it's because I get to take you to my aquarium, to the place where I volunteer and that I love and that I have built a relationship with so many of the people that is so meaningful to me. And then also one of those people is my guest today. I have spent a long time hanging out with and working with Abby, and I'm excited to share her with all of you. And since we are doing this as a Valentine's Day special, we are going to be talking a lot about the penguins at the Aquarium of Niagara, specifically talking about some different things related to mating, maybe getting rid of some myths that some of you may believe about certain penguins, but also talking about a really fascinating thing to me, which is that, we know that penguins have complex mating structures and that there's a lot of monogamy, maybe not as much as some people think, but there's a lot of that. But we also know that there's an SSP that deals with the different species of penguins. They all have their own SSP, to be clear. And so how do you make that work? How do you have potential breeding partners decided by a committee, but then, the birds have to agree? This isn't like so many of the species that we take care of in human care, where the animals just kind of get together to mate and then wander off. And it doesn't always mean there will be a match, but more likely than not, like when you talk about animals like red pandas and stuff, they'll mate most of the time for convenience rather than, for love. And so we're here to talk about some of that. And you're actually going to get to hear a very cute love story involving Abby. And I'm just going to leave it at that for now. So, don't forget to make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of the podcast. Make sure you're following along on the socials at Rossifari, at Rossifari Pod on the TikTok machine. Y'all know what to do by now. And let's get to it. It is time, lovers, for our interview with the one, the only, the incomparable Abby of the Aquarium of Niagara. Enjoy, lovers.
And today we're going to be chatting about penguins.
Penguins! Yes. And for those listening, y'all know that I do volunteer at the aquarium. And for over a year, I was volunteering on Abby's team. So we go back a bit. We've spent some time in the water together. We have.
You've gotten in with our birds to do some maintenance and cleaning.
You almost saved me when I almost fell getting out of the pool once, I remember. Yeah.
It does take some practice. It does.
Yes. So there's some fond memories there. And I'm really excited to share you with my listeners. So before we get to the bird stuff, just introduce yourself. Why are you here? What do you love about penguins? What was your career like? What was your path to this career? All that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to say that penguins were kind of a happy accident for me. I had kind of a 180 in college where I started off as an engineering major, realized that I didn't have a lot of excitement or passion for any of the courses that were ahead of me or the job opportunities that were out there, and started looking around for something that did inspire that passion, and had always had a love of animals and was looking at some of the biology courses I could take and just got so excited. So took that switch, And penguins come in because they were my first internship after making that switch. Not too long after, I interned with the New England Aquarium with their penguin colony.
Amazing place.
So cool. Such an immersive experience to have that be your first experience in the field. And the penguins were so sassy and so full of personality. They completely caught me off guard and I was hooked. So I kept my foot in the door with them for another couple of years before, getting that first start as, a paid professional in the field, and kind of stuck with penguins the whole way. So it's been 11 years now and I wouldn't trade any of it for the world.
Wow. 11 years is a lot of time with penguins.
It is. It's a lot of bites.
Yeah. No doubt. That's really cool. I didn't realize that was your start. I knew you had been up there. I've interviewed about the penguin colonies and stuff up at the aquarium, and yeah, it's a really special place.
It is. It's really cool. And it was a much larger colony than we have here at the Aquarium of Niagara, and I think that sets you up well to then transition to a smaller colony where you can really dive in a lot more to each of those individuals.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when I'm interviewing people and they're like, yeah, we have 50 birds, 60 birds. And I'm like, excuse me, how many?
Yeah, it was hectic, but I think every experience you have like that, where you're a little bit in over your head and you really have to step up your game to meet the challenges, the demands of that position, prepares you so well for all of the twists and turns that this field has in store.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was your title here again?
Senior Animal Care Specialist.
Yes, and the senior part implies a bit of like leadership and such. And I know that's a relatively newer situation. So talk about that and what that transition's been like.
Yeah, so we have a combined department, marine mammals and birds, which is becoming more and more common in the zoo and aquarium field nowadays. And that senior bit of the title is only within like the last year and a half. So we've seen a lot of transitions over that last year. There's been a lot of big events with our animal collection. And so it's been an adjustment. It's been really cool for me personally, having so much of a background in penguins, transitioning to a more fluid role between the marine mammal and bird halves of that department, and learning about our pinniped collection and learning to work with them and building relationships with those animals has been incredibly rewarding and such an interesting challenge, moving from birds to a very, very different group of animals.
Very different, yes. And I'm curious, so I know that with pinnipeds in general, there's a lot of training, and there's training with all animals. I know that. But as you've gotten more into that side of things, and as that's become more of a focus, as I know you do the presentations and all of that, does that affect how you think about training with the penguins at all? Or were you already very on board with that? And, just what's that been like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It has had a huge impact on it. Coming from more of that bird background, I didn't have a whole lot of training experience. And so with our penguin colony, there was almost that hump of not knowing quite where to start and how to go about doing that. And so we've been able to pull a lot from the very well-established training program with our pinnipeds and tweak it to fit the birds a little bit better, but to give us that foothold to start. And we've been making great progress with that. We've been really training in depth with our penguins for a couple of years now. And a lot of them are doing really, really well. We've got, some newer birds like our juveniles and some birds that are newer to our facility that are starting to work into that program and catching on very quick. So it's been another interesting challenge, sort of translating the training information and the training side of things into a different set of species and figuring out what the goals of training for that group looks like, because it's very different than the pinniped presentations that we do. All of it's mostly focusing on healthcare and husbandry behaviors and working with our penguins where they're at and building their confidence and their relationship with us.
That's awesome. So, let's dive into the penguins. And specifically, we have Humboldt penguins here. So what I like to do whenever we talk penguins, because people always have their preconceived notions of penguins and think that like all penguins are the same, and they're very much not. So can you give the audience like an overview of Humboldts and, where they're from, and do they mate for life? Do they really mate for life? Do they hold eggs on their feet, or do they have nests? All that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is, I think, one of the most interesting things about working with penguins is creating that light bulb moment for guests that not all penguins are from Antarctica. And many of them like things much different than those really cold weather species. So Humboldt penguins, the ones we have here at the Aquarium of Niagara, are one of those warm weather species.
Which is ironic because there are about 16 inches of snow out there right now, but you know.
Oh yes, Buffalo is having a time with the winter weather lately. But our penguins are nice and cozy indoors.
Yes.
Their exhibit stays around 70 degrees. They're a species that's native to the western coastlines of Chile and Peru, right alongside very hot and arid places like the Atacama Desert. So they are much better adapted for hot temperatures than they are for the current lake effect snow that we are experiencing here. They are in the family of banded penguins. So along with African penguins, Magellanics, and Galapagos penguins, they are burrow nesters. So they will either take advantage of some sort of cave or crevice that already exists or build a burrow for themselves, usually out of their own guano or poop, which makes penguin colonies a very stinky place to be. And they will defend that territory pretty aggressively from nosy neighbors, from predators, from people that come snooping by too closely. And we see that in our colony here as well. We have sort of incorporated nest boxes that are built right into our exhibit. And everyone in the colony has their own little patch of territory that they keep a very close eye on and make sure that no one comes too close to their personal business. They are very dissimilar from the emperor penguin that we see in March of the Penguin, Happy Feet, in that they'll actually lay 2 eggs, and the parents will share incubation duties very evenly. So every couple of days, they're swapping out throughout a 40-day incubation period, and then throughout the entire 2 or 3 months of that chick rearing period as well, making what I like to call grocery trips to and from the sea, bringing back a belly full of fish to either wait out that couple of days until their partner's back or to feed those hungry chicks until their partner comes back. So it's a very cooperative breeding process with this species, and they will maintain very long-term relationships. So if circumstances allow, if both halves of that partner survive a year of predation, make it back to the same breeding site, make it back in time for the breeding season, they'll stick with the same partner for many, many years. We actually have a penguin couple in our colony that have been together for 18 years.
18 years.
Can be very long-term. But
which couple is that?
That's Mario and Montana.
I know. I love them.
They're so sweet.
They're my favorite penguins here,
They're
just
so
for the
sweet.
record. So, yeah.
They are absolute lovebirds. But if they happen to lose their mate, either here or out in their natural environment, they will move on and bond with a new penguin quite readily. So it's quite possible that they have multiple mates over the course of their lifetime, and we see that with our colony as well. We have our oldest female has been paired up with a couple of older males who she's outlived, and she has, each time moved on and formed that partnership anew because they get pretty much all of their positive social interactions from that mate. So they really seek out that relationship if they happen to lose it in one way or another.
Yeah, and that is such a great transition into exactly. I thought this was your first time interviewing, but I feel like you set that up very well. So, talk to me about this because, like you said, it's an interesting situation when you have birds that need to partner up and want to partner up, but then we have SSPs, the breeding program and all of that, and It seems like there'd be a whole lot of complexity there. So I know that the colony has gone through a couple of changes recently with that. So can you talk to me about how that happens and how those decisions get made and how you play matchmaker and all of that?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I find very interesting. One of my first internships in college, I learned about SSPs and what those programs did and how they worked, and I was hooked. So we are actively participating in the Humboldt Penguin Species Survival Plan, which makes breeding and transfer recommendations for that whole population under human care. It's us and about 21 or 22 other facilities that house this species. And so every year they sort of take a survey of those facilities and see what are the needs of those different places, who has extra birds that they might want to send out who is trying to grow their colony and might be looking to take in some extra individuals. And the SSP coordinator will take all of those pieces into account. They'll look at the genetics, the family trees of all of those penguins, and play matchmaker a little bit. They'll recommend birds to move between different facilities. They will recommend very genetically diverse individuals, maybe to pair, to reproduce and produce that next generation of Humboldt penguins. And so all of those recommendations are taken into account when we are looking at a breeding season or looking at a year for our colony. So we recently had a couple of transfers that were recommended by that SSP. We sent one of our 5-year-old males, Smitty, to the Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium, which was a bit bittersweet because he was one of the first chicks to be hatched here for us in over 14 years back in 2020. So that was a sad goodbye, but also very exciting for him as he steps forward into that new chapter of his life with a new colony. And we received transfer of another penguin from the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. We got Timmy in, and that was a recommendation not only to receive that transfer, but also to be paired up with one of our single females, Jules. So we have been working on setting the scene for them to hopefully form that bond. They've actually recently been introduced to the rest of our colony on exhibit, which is very exciting to see if the hopeful signs that we were seeing behind the scenes can make that transition to life in the colony.
Very cool. So we're talking about, it sounds like it's a 2-step program or process where you have to introduce them and play some Barry White, and I don't know, we got to talk about what you do to get that situation going, and then you introduce that pairing to the colony and see how that works. So let's talk about that first step first. Okay, so Timmy comes in, and take it away.
Yeah, so any animal that comes in goes through a quarantine period just to make sure that they go through a lot of pre-shipment exams on the sending end of things, but we want to make sure that things look okay for him on the receiving end of things before we introduce him to other birds. But we do have behind the scenes holding areas. So Timmy was able to go through his quarantine there, and then we brought Jules in to hang out with him. And penguins, like I said, will very readily bond with an available partner because they seek out those sort of positive interactions. So they, from the start, were coexisting pretty well, which is always a bit of a toss-up for penguins. They can be pretty feisty and pretty territorial. So that was a great sign to see from the get-go that they were sharing space well. They, didn't have too much conflict between them. But
actually, I'm going to pause you there for a second because I'm curious about something. So something that I've heard you say hundreds of times is that, penguins explore the world with their beaks. And you've mentioned that you've been bit a lot of times. I've taken a beak or two in my day, just there, and it happens, right? And they can be aggressive and they can be territorial. So when you're introducing two birds to each other, how do you determine when it's like two birds just kind of like figuring things out and like exploring with their beaks and maybe being a little territorial, but also like naturally so, like you said, this is what would happen in the wild, versus I need to step in and grab this bird and move it kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a lot of observation. Obviously, when you're doing any kind of introduction, we are there monitoring. So when they were first introduced, we have a camera system. We were watching through the window just to make sure that things were going smoothly. And there's always going to be little dust ups. You might see them, briefly peck at each other or, vocalize a little bit. And I think what we're looking for there is duration and sort of intensity of interaction. So they did have some little moments. Timmy is on the younger side, so he's about 1.5 years old, and might still be learning some social cues, especially as he starts to reach maturity. So, he might not always pick up on signals that another bird is giving off, like, hey, you're a little bit too close to my space. But Jules did a very good job of letting him know when she felt crowded. But they were all brief interactions that were over very quickly. There wasn't any sort of extended conflict that we were seeing. So, those interactions happen sometimes between bonded pairs, between any of the individuals in our colony, if someone just happens to maybe walk too close to them on the beach. So it was all very within normal bounds of what you'd expect just from two penguins that are in the same space.
Right. And can you explain? So you're talking about the vocalizations,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just one of my favorite penguin facts. But can you explain what that is called and what the noise is like? I'm not going to ask you to like recreate it, but what that is.
That's one of our educators' favorite tricks. Is to be like, hey, we can't hear any vocalizations. Could you make one for us? It's always worth a shot, but it would take a lot for me to fall for that one. Yeah, so penguins have a lot of body language that they use to communicate with one another, posture, the way their head is placed, the way they're moving their head. But they also have vocalizations that they'll use to sort of communicate that next step of, hey, you're really not listening to my body language. I'm going to make it very clear for you. And the one that comes most in handy for territorial behavior is called an ecstatic display. So
it's my favorite. I think that might be my favorite like expression that I have learned doing this podcast.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's so neat. And like every penguin species has a different ecstatic display. They're also varied. None of them are sounds that you would expect to come out of a small bird. They've got quite the set of lungs on them. But for a Humboldt penguin, it sounds a little bit like the braying of a donkey,
yes.
Kind of like a foghorn. And that is usually accompanied by their head thrown straight back up in the air, their wings out to both sides, just absolutely heaving their chest and putting everything that they have into that vocalization.
They're so dramatic.
They really
I love
are.
It so much.
A lot of times people think that they're hearing our sea lions. And when I explain that it's actually the penguins, they are just blown away, which is another great light bulb moment to see in people.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a time, I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody was being a little salty in the break room here. And I was just like, ecstatic display, and the whole room lost it, and it cut the tension really well. And I was really proud of that one. 2 words just completely changed the room.
Yeah, it's something. It changes Penguin Coast too when one pair starts to vocalize and really sort of set that boundary for themselves. A lot of times it sets off this chain reaction where everyone else has to put in their 2 cents and also starts vocalizing the exhibit.
I love it so much. So, okay, so these 2 birds did pretty well together, right?
Yeah, they did.
That's awesome. Cool. Now, I'm curious when a partnership starts, generically or with Timmy and Joel specifically, does it ramp up quickly? Does it go right from like we just met to like mating behavior, or is it like a slow burn?
I think it probably depends on the individual.
Okay.
So from what we've seen, there's usually a bit of a slow burn, and then, sometimes there's almost that inflection point where you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like it becomes, we see whispers of it almost, and then it becomes very obvious. They're like, yes, they are settling in. They are, forming that type of bond. So for, a couple of birds that we have played matchmaker for, we have Timmy and Jules, obviously that's kind of ongoing right now, but we've also in the past have paired up one of our currently mated pairs in the same way, Iggy and Gannon, who just had their first chick this year, which is very exciting. And you sort of start to see them existing as 2 separate individuals in the same space, and then getting a little bit closer and closer. They might start, following each other a little bit closely. They might start standing right next to each other, sleeping right next to each other, almost like wing to wing. And those are great indicators for us that things are going very well and they're moving in a good direction. You might start to see them ecstatic displaying together, or showing more interest in a nest box, or, sort of seeking out some sort of territory on their own. So we were starting to see some of those behaviors from Timmy and Jules behind the scenes, which is why we felt confident in making that transition out to the rest of the colony. And penguins are social animals. Despite not really liking anyone in their personal space, they do take a lot of their cues from the birds that are around them. So we felt that having Timmy and Jules in with the rest of the colony would help to progress that bond a little bit better, especially as we head towards our breeding season coming up fairly soon. And hopefully they're seeing some of those behaviors from the more established bonded pairs and bringing some of that into their own budding partnership.
Very cool. And I know from some of the younger birds here when I was working with y'all on that they learn from, like you said, watching and learning from other birds. But sometimes it seems like it doesn't land right away, and they start to give maybe the wrong cues, or they start to like, I know we've seen birds just kind of try to initiate mating, but
I don't even know that they knew they were trying to initiate mating. They were just doing the arm flappy, the wing flappy, you know. So I'm curious with Timmy and Jules, since Timmy is so much younger and is just coming into that situation, does Jules kind of have to be the older penguin and teach some of that stuff, or does nature take over, or, you know, how does that work? Who's the leader?
I think we'll have to wait and see. Okay. Jules is definitely, you know, she's was hatched with us in 2020. So she definitely knows the ropes on exhibit. She knows where she can be, where she can't be, where is going to get her yelled at. So Timmy is definitely, I think, watching very closely and taking a lot of that information into his own sort of habits on exhibit. But he's doing a very good job. I think he has most of the social skills he needs. But that is, you know, that process that you're describing is one of my favorite things about having young penguins on exhibit, because they just have no idea what they're doing.
No.
And they'll see a behavior from a bonded pair or an adult, and then they'll take that and regurgitate it in their next social interaction, and oftentimes a completely wrong context, which does not result in the reaction that they expect, I think. And watching that learning process for them is so entertaining and so rewarding to see them start to piece together how to be a penguin within, you know, the context of a colony. And doesn't always go smoothly, but they figure it out eventually. But Timmy's doing a good job. He's, like I said, taking very close watch of Jules and figuring out what she's doing and what he should be doing. But he's settling in so well. He's doing a very good job of respecting the personal boundaries of the other penguins, which is the most important and sometimes challenging thing for a new individual to learn.
Basically anywhere, not just penguins.
That's very true.
So that's awesome. So how has the colony introduction been going?
Very good. Yeah. I feel like a lot less changes for them. They might have, you know, this new individual who sometimes shows up in places he shouldn't, but they do a good job of communicating where he's not welcome. I think the biggest notice that anyone has taken is one of our juveniles, Cantuta. She's about 10 months old, and she has been glued to Timmy's side. She is so curious about the new bird. She wants to know what he's doing all of the time, just tagging along like, you know, the annoying little sister on exhibit, because she is Jules's little sister. They're very similar in so many ways, and she's so curious about who this new bird is and what he's doing. And she is smack in the middle of that learning phase of juvenilehood that I was just talking about. And so she is, I think, attached herself to the only other bird who also doesn't seem like he fully knows what's going on.
I really like that. But that does also bring up an interesting question, which is, so once you've got this pair and they're bonding and things are going well, so you introduce them as a bonded pair, right? And you're like, hey guys, here's this pair. But like, the penguins in the colony don't have to respect that, and they don't have to respect that, you know? Timmy could wander in there and see some other lovely lady and be like, oh, hey, what's up? So how do you manage all of that?
It's a little bit of setting them up for success in the best ways we know how, you know, taking into account the current social dynamics in the colony and things like that. But a little bit of it is up to chance. You know, it is sort of that, you know, we've done all we can on our end to sort of set them up to establish that pair, and then seeing where they take it from there. So the only other single lady for Timmy is on our exhibit right now is Cantuta, and she and Jules are siblings. So going back to that SSP and looking at, you know, how things are recommended genetically, Jules and Cantuta are very similar in that sense. So if Timmy decides that Jules has it all figured out and that's very intimidating for him, he could always, you know, and chooses, you know, decides that Cantuta might be a better option for him in the eyes of the SSP and sort of the overall breeding for our colony. That wouldn't make too much of a difference in the long run, genetically speaking.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. And that's good. But when it does, like in general, right? Great. We're talking about this one couple. So yeah, great job. But in general, what would you do? How do you figure that out? If a mystery egg shows up, tell me things.
Yeah, mystery eggs can be tricky.
Because let's be honest, they partner up, but sometimes things can happen. Is
there's
that a
exceptions to every rule.
Yeah,
Penguins are monogamous with an asterisk after.
Fair.
So that is where it gets a little bit tricky. You can make all the observations that you can, and you can try to figure out who is cozying up with who. But, if you have a lot of closely related individuals in any one colony, it might impact decisions that are made surrounding a mystery egg. For the most part, all of our egg-producing females are very consistently bonded with their mate. We haven't really seen them flirting around too much or anything. So for the birds that we have right now and all of our bonded pairs, we can be pretty darn confident of who the parents of that egg are. But that would be a little bit of a, have to have a, what's that show? You're Not the Father? Maury? Ask Maury.
Maury or Jerry Springer, all of those work. Yeah.
Yeah, we might have to, go down that rabbit hole one day. With the current colony we have now, it's pretty consistent. Like I said, Maury and Monty, they've been together for 18 years. They have not strayed from each other's side once. So with a lot of those really established pairs, it makes our confidence level very high in what's going on with the breeding season.
Speaking of romance, I know, again, I really enjoy doing doing interviews with people I know. So tell me about your dating life. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But
it's going great.
But what I want to hear about is you had a penguin fall in love with you. And that's a thing that can happen. And I'm really eager to talk about that and what that's like for you. And so just tell the whole story. Who was that? What was that like? And all of those things.
Yeah. So we have a fairly long-term bachelor in our colony named Desi. And for the first several years that I was working here at the Aquarium of Niagara, he didn't really show any interest in pairing up with anyone. He was in a long-term committed relationship with food. He is the bottomless pit of our exhibit. But it switched one molting season. So as close as I can pinpoint it, during a penguin's catastrophic molt, they gain a lot of weight. They kind of sit around on the beach and don't really do much of anything while they're losing and replacing all of those new feathers. But they also get really hungry beforehand to gain all of that weight to sustain them through that process. And Desi, being a bottomless pit at the best of times, turns into a gaping abyss when he's getting ready for his molt. And so he, in an effort to get more food, tried to follow me out of the exhibit, ended up in an area where he was a little bit too chunky to get out of, which happened to be right next to the territory of one of our other penguins. So being penguins, they tried to chase him out. He got a little bit stuck. I helped him out of that sticky situation. And about a week or two later, I noticed him starting to display flirtatious behaviors towards me on exhibit, which has since escalated into the equivalent of a pair bond, which is very cute, incredibly gratifying to come into work when you're greeted with a snuggly, lovey penguin, because that's very much so not the norm for them. Right. So it's fun to experience that, and it's been a couple of years of some pretty good, relationship between Desi and I, which is very exciting. It makes husbandry for him very easy because he's very comfy with being handled, being touched by me specifically, but it makes any checkups that are needed a breeze for him, very low stress for him, because I can provide that sort of comfort for him during that process. But this year he's actually started to branch out a little bit, and he's shown some inklings of maybe showing interest in one of our other males on exhibit. So we're sort of seeing where that goes for him. I'm very excited that he might find a more appropriate mate for himself. Not that I don't love it, but I am not a great partner.
I was going to say, I'm genuinely curious. Does that, do you ever feel in that moment like, oh, because the one thing I know about anybody in an animal care position is that you will do anything to make your animals' lives as good as possible, within reason. But you can't actually date them. You can't actually go and share a nest box with.
No,
with
he does try to entice me. when we're over in that area of the exhibit, he'll, make his little flirty noises and then like try to lead me back to the nest box.
He's like Netflix and
I
chill?
can't fit. I cannot fit in the nest box.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But like, does it ever actually do you ever feel any kind of way about like, oh, I should give him a special treat or I shouldn't, or like, does that ever cross your mind when you know what he's thinking, or to the best of your ability, you know what he's, demonstrating at least? There's
a little bit of guilt taking vacations and things like that. But he's always so excited to see me when I come back. It's that balance of, sort of making sure that he has the interactions that he needs to make his life more fulfilling, and balancing all of the rest of my responsibilities. Because if he had his way, I would just sit there with him all day, which is unfortunately not an option. Very unfortunately. There is that little bit of thought of, if I'm, gone for a long weekend or a longer period of time that, that he might be there waiting, which is why I'm really excited that he is showing a little bit of interest in another penguin, because that can provide that companionship while I'm not there. But this other individual has made it very clear that just because I am Desi's girlfriend does not mean that he is also my boyfriend. We have a love angle going on. It's not connected.
That's fantastic. Yes. How very romantic.
It's very special.
Yeah. So what is the size of the colony here right now?
We have 15 penguins currently.
It's a good number.
It is a good number.
I like it. Yeah.
We have a little bit of room to grow, but we've got, enough birds that things are nice and interesting. There's always something going on in the colony.
Yeah. And when you introduce a new couple into 13 other birds, I can math. You've got so much stuff, like you said, that's established, right? Because they're very territorial. You've got the nest boxes, which, by the way, it's a really cool setup here for people that haven't seen it. It's a big rocky cliff area, and then they just go into their nest boxes just like they would out, in their natural habitat, except that it's not poop, which is fantastic. So nice. Although they get pretty covered, even though you clean them every day. But birds poop a lot.
They're not too shy about where or when or who they poop on.
No, yes. But so when you introduce, a new pair, right? And what is that like as far as just the logistics? Will the colony adapt? What if they want a nest that's already taken? Or in this case, is it like Jules already had a nest, so she wants to go back to that? And it's like, how does all of that work?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we take into consideration, sort of what are the options for this new penguin or this new pair. Jules did have a bit of a territory, so she was sort of in the middle part of our exhibit previously, so she seems to have gravitated back towards that area. And like I said, Timmy is taking a lot of his cues from her, so he's just sort of following her wherever she goes. But we did have that thought as well. And, in case Jules didn't feel like going back to that same area, or in case there was something else, we'll look at the nest boxes as a whole. We don't always have all of them open to the exhibit. Everyone's pretty established in their areas. So we have a good idea of where they're going to go. We don't need too many extras open, but when we introduce new birds like that, we will take that into account. We'll provide extra options. We'll open up a couple of new nest boxes in case they want to choose something different, in case someone already established decides that they want to move and then opens up that extra option that way. And we kind of let things shake out a little bit. We'll wait until the dust settles, any changes that are going to happen or territories that are going to be established. We'll wait until all of that settles down and everyone seems pretty set in where they're going to be. And then we can adjust further with nest boxes. If there's one that's really not being used by anyone, we can close that one off again. But it is a great setup for stuff like that, because they're modified dog kennels. They're all connected directly to the exhibit, and we have little doors on the front so we can open or close whichever ones we need to for maintenance, for cleaning, for managing social interactions like that. So it comes in really handy, and it works pretty well for us.
It's really cool. Yeah, I like that system a lot. I remember the first time I was behind the scenes there, and I was just blown away by all of that. It's very cool. So there's one other topic that I wanted to hit before we wrap up. And I don't even know what to call it, but you will, because this is your job. But we got to share an experience a little while ago of figuring out information about chicks and eggs while they were still in the egg. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You got to be a part of it. Zoe got to be a part of it. It was a very cool experience. And I actually know for a fact from talking to some penguin keepers that there are whole facilities that don't even know this is a thing that you can do. Like with penguins.
Yeah.
I was recently talking to somebody and trying to explain this, and they were like, I've never heard of anything like this. So because of that, I was like, oh, and I'm interviewing Abby soon. Cool. Let's just get this out to everybody who listens about what that is, what that technique is, how you use it, all of that, because it was ridiculously cool to watch that.
It was really cool to be a part of too. So the procedure that we're talking about is in ovo sexing. So while that embryo is still inside of the shell and developing, you can take a blood sample, and many birds, penguins especially, don't display sexual dimorphism. So when a chick is young, you usually take a blood sample anyway to tell whether they're male or female. But using this technique, you can actually do that while they're still inside the shell. So you know whether that chick is going to be male or female when it hatches. And we successfully did that for the very first time this past breeding season. So we sexed a couple of eggs. Cantuta was one of those eggs. So that 10-month-old juvenile who is tag teaming all over the place after Timmy was the very first time that we had attempted that procedure and for realsies, which is very, very cool. And it was something that was recommended by the SSP to some degree. So when they're managing that population, they're not only looking at the genetic diversity of the population, how self-sustaining it is, so making sure that there are enough chicks hatched each year to suit everyone's needs, to replace any penguins that may have passed away over the course of the last year. But they're also looking at things like age distribution and sex ratio in that population. And for the Humboldt penguin population in that SSP, right now there's a lot more males than there are females. And so it's very imbalanced. And there are a lot of single men looking around that have no single ladies within that population to, pair up with. And so that SSP gives each potential pairing within a colony score based on how genetically related that they are. So a 1 is a great score. Those two are complete strangers. They share no relatives, down to a 6, which is they've got some shared relatives, maybe, a shared grandfather or great grandfather. There is some connection in that family tree. Doesn't contribute as much to the overall genetic diversity of the population. And so that SSP over the course of the last couple of years has recommended for those less genetically valuable pairs to attempt egg sexing to try to even out that male-female distribution in the population. So it was a very cool thing for us. And the way it really works is as that embryo inside the egg is developing, there are several sets of membranes that it starts to grow to feed itself nutrients, to support gas exchange as it continues to grow within the shell. And one of those membranes has a lot of veins and vasculature, and it lays right inside the inside of the shell. And so if you're very, very careful, you can use a small Dremel or some sort of sanding tool to thin down the shell over one of those veins to the point where there's no shell left, but that membrane is still intact. And then if you use a very small needle, like an insulin needle, you can actually draw blood from that vessel and send it to be sexed, which is very, very cool. It's very delicate. And we had a great team of people that were all sort of figuring it out. And a big part of that too came down to a workshop that I attended last year at Zoo Atlanta, all about embryo development in birds and egg incubation. So all of these tools and knowledge came in a lot of handy for things like that egg sexing procedure and during our breeding season last year.
Yeah, so cool.
It was so neat.
And you do it while like candling.
Yes.
But you can't have it there. Like you can't get the egg too hot because that affects it. Like there's so much
huge
that goes
balancing
into
act.
It. Yes, it was so impressive to watch.
Yeah.
It was so cool, and it was successful.
Yeah,
which is the coolest part. Yeah,
because candling is really the only way to see where those veins are, and you don't want to take away too much shell because that's what's protecting the embryo. So you got to really narrow in on exactly where that vessel is with the egg against the candler and do your thing. And like even look at the egg in the candler while you're trying to draw blood so you can see if you're in the right area or not. It's wild. I have to like pinch myself sometimes that, we were able to do all of that. And that I was lucky enough to be a part of it.
Yeah, very, very cool stuff. All right. Well, thank you for this time. But before we get going, we do need to find out if there is a conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to.
Yes. So this might be unsurprising given that I am the penguin nerd, but I have volunteered twice with an organization in South Africa called SANCOB. It's the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. They are working tirelessly, endlessly to protect and conserve endangered South American species like the Cape gannet, but more importantly, the African penguin. They were uplisted last year to critically endangered, which is very, very sad. And this organization, this rescue rehab center, is putting everything they have into making sure that every single African penguin left in that population has a chance to contribute to the future of their species. So that will forever be my conservation shout out. They are incredible. They work so, so hard. And it is exhausting, often unforgiving work. So please support them if you have the chance.
Yeah, SANCOB is great. We love them. And their new friends, NAMCOB. Because, they're doing that in Namibia now as well. Yeah. So, yeah, exciting stuff. And then last but not least,
it's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show, but there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Oh my gosh. With penguins, it's hard to pick because they are projectile poopers. They are constantly pooping. But there's one from early in my career, actually, while I was at the New England Aquarium in Boston. The way they have their exhibit set up, the staff and the volunteers who are caring for those penguins are essentially wading through like chest deep water with very thick wetsuits on. The penguins are hauled out on islands that sort of rise up out of the water. So a lot of times the birds are above you, which gives them a very unfortunate angle. And I was moving around and doing some cleaning in the section that housed their little blue penguins when they still had that species. And one of those little blue penguins, this tiny little 2-3 pound bird, turned around and pooped on me. But because of where they were, at the very top of the island, it actually landed on the side of my neck and then made its way down into and underneath my wetsuit, which is a horrifying feeling because the internal temperature of a penguin is about 102 degrees. So it was hot and very disgusting. So that is my poop story because, oh man, was that memorable.
Yeah. Oof. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. It was so much fun.
Yay.
Well, there you have it, folks. I hope y'all really enjoyed that one. I had a really good time, as I'm sure you could tell, because what other kind of time could you have on Rossifari After Dark? I'd like to thank the Aquarium of Niagara, and especially Abby, for being so great to me all the time and for being on the podcast. I'd also like to say thank you to all of my sexy, sexy patrons, especially those gorgeous, gorgeous, lovely Red Panda level patrons, including Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for the stickers, Kevin Williams, and Cormac McMuffin. Meow. Sorry, I'm not making a cat sexy. We'll be back on Friday with a brand new Zoo News episode, and until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is a very, very sexy sounding Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. Oh. you liked that one now, didn't you?